Now, what you do, the scholar Dobbins, what you do is begin to take the church's records and look at how many Native Americans they wiped out. Because, you know, the church, which was busy trying to change us, kept a very definitive record of how successful they were at massacring the indigenous people here. Verrazano, in his diary, very carefully documented the phenotypes of the people here from Central America up through Nova Scotia, where my father's people come from the Ethiopian-looking people in Florida to the light Eskimo-type people in Nova Scotia. So we know what the people look like here. Now, why do they tell you that there's only one road to this hemisphere? Think about it. 100,000 years in the Ice Age. They're telling you that original people left the equator, tropical people stayed 100,000 years in the Ice Age, then came out and started migrating, came over here and quote-unquote reverted back into tropical people. Rather than tell you that, as we heard early this morning, in the oceanic belt of the equator, what do you see? Little black people here, little black people here, little black people here, little black people. But did they go that way? No, anthropology tells you they all went up to Siberia because they want to say the European was the first person to cross the Atlantic Ocean, right? That is what they want you to understand. Now, how difficult is it to get across the Atlantic Ocean? The second theory of diffusion of people is that, well, maybe they didn't just come through the Bering Straits. Maybe they went across the Indian Ocean, which is twice as wide as the Atlantic, or the Pacific, which is 3 times as wide as the Atlantic. Rather than say Africans left the equator belt of Africa and went right across the Atlantic to Brazil, right? That's where most of the people are. There is no archaeological evidence to suggest that they came down, and there are no 25,000 or 30,000-year-old fossils in Canada. They're in Central America, so they disappeared, their bones disappeared along the way. Rather than tell you they came across the ocean, how difficult is it to get across the Atlantic Ocean? When Admiral Cabral, again another European who discovered Brazil, according to Caminha, C-A-M-I-N-H-A, in the diary written at the time, because I like to read the diaries written at the time, they were trying to skirt the Congo River. You know the Congo River right outside of Africa? Central, right near the equator. They were trying to skirt the Congo River. They were in the Atlantic Ocean trying to skirt the turbulence coming out of the Congo River and got blown across the Atlantic. That's how difficult it is to get across the Atlantic Ocean. Now, if you read Ivan Van Sertima, you'll see all these currents. There's a book, I have it in my pocketbook, by Thor Heyerdahl, who then created a reed ship and showed you how easy it is to get across the Atlantic. Now, reeds are just paper, but Europeans didn't know that Africans, ancient Egyptians, were wise enough to actually make all kinds of boats that could go across the ocean. They knew all this kind of technology. So what they did, to get back to the concept of epistemology, was to tell you this hemisphere, North and South and Central America, developed in isolation to the rest of the world. Isn't that what they tell you? They tell you the migration only came through the Bering Strait, and then people reverted into these phenotypes. These are assumptions we're accepting to keep the idea that there is only one way to get here. Now, here's the second thing. In Egypt, you have pyramids. The Nile was wet 7,000, 9,000 years BC. It was wet. And then it dried up around 4,000 BC, and people dispersed, if you read Sheikh Anta Diop. Now, here's another example of this non-migratory around the equator. You have pyramids in Egypt. You have pyramids in West Africa. And you have pyramids in Central America. You have those great big thick-lipped, big-nosed megaliths in the Ivory Coast, and you have them in the Olmec civilization here. But did they cross the ocean? No, because Columbus discovered America. So, so when you read the explanation for the divine kingship in Central America, that is the same as in Egypt or Kemet, that is the same as we heard this morning in the Ivory Coast in West Africa. And Len Jeffries can tell you in the Ivory Coast, I believe it is, they found 100 of those megalith heads. This brother who put out the gold weights. Now, here we have all this evidence. I mean, irrefutable evidence. Pyramids here, pyramids here, pyramids here. Big stone heads here, big stone heads here, big stone heads here. All African. But is this a diffusion of culture? No, no. No, this is parallel development. We all thought of it at the same time. Rather than say Africans came across the ocean. Now, we sit around, I know most of you sit around and say, that's kind of sophisticated. It's not. They tell us so many lies.